Hello and welcome back to the channel on our continuing voice to become better blues players. My name's Mark, and in this video I'm going to answer a question that was sent in to me on email around, it sounds quite a simple question: how do you write your own blues licks? So obviously if you've seen the channel before, you've seen I've done lots of lessons and things where I'm teaching how to play licks, and so the question was about how do you actually write your own blues lick? How do I write blues licks? So I'm going to attempt to answer this question in two completely different ways. First of all, we're going to look at a very mechanical, very prescriptive way of writing a blues lick, of do this, don't do that kind of thing. Now that's going to really suit some people, but it's not going to suit other people. What we're also going to do in the second half of the video is we're going to look at a much more kind of creative, intuitive way of coming up with your own blues licks. And again, that will suit some people better, and other people won't like that so much. Personally, I use both, and when I was learning, I used both in parallel, and we'll talk about that at the end. And some people, for some people, both together is going to work really well. So we're going to start with the mechanical way of trying to decompose is that the right word? I'm not sure. Pull apart what a blues lick is and try and figure out how we write our own. If that's not for you, if you want something that's more kind of creative and intuitive, skip to the second half of the video. Okay, so I'm going to start by giving you some particular guidance. There's a couple of topics that we're going to cover. Now these are topics that we've covered already in the Improvisation series, which I put on YouTube earlier this year. So with all of these, if you want to dive into any one of the topics a bit more, go and check out that, because we are actually covering a lot of the same ground, but it answers the question. Okay, so the first thing is establish the root note. And if you've seen any of my videos on any of my lessons before, you'll be well aware of how much importance and how much I focus on the root note. If you just start learning a scale and you just start playing, it can feel like you're kind of wandering around the fretboard, not really knowing, kind of just randomly picking notes. Understanding the root note, it kind of pulls everything together. It's an anchoring point. It's the note that sounds most in tune, most harmonious, most natural when you play it. If you only play the root note in a solo, it's going to sound very boring. So what we do is we dance around the root note. The further away from it we get, the more tension, and then we come back to the root note to kind of release that tension. So if we were playing in the key of A, okay, and we're playing over some kind of backing that's a bit like that, we want to establish our root note. So I've got one here, 7th fret of the D string, and we basically play around with that. Okay, so wherever the lick is, I'm playing. Usually I'm ending on the root note and holding it and shaking it. You start to do that, it sounds less like you're playing scales. I was just playing around with the A minor pentatonic scale there, just picking notes around that root note and then coming back to rest on it. As I say, cover this an awful lot in my lesson, so I'm not going to dwell too much on that one. Next thing to do is to figure out, okay, well, what scale am I going to use? So the truth is you could play any note in a 12-bar blues. Okay, you've got 12 chromatic notes, and what a scale does is a scale just picks out a certain group of notes which already sound good. And when we think of like a pentatonic scale, that takes all of those 12 chromatic notes and just reduces it down to 5 notes, which are going to be the ones that kind of sound best, sound most in tune. And within there, the root note is the one that sounds the most in tune of all. Okay, so that's why we put so much emphasis on the pentatonic scale. So you don't have to stick to scales, but the scales are just kind of guidelines, so kind of checkpoints along the fretboard of where the best sounding notes are. So that's why we use scales. So what we've done is we've figured out where our root note is. We've picked the scale. In this case, let's stick with A minor pentatonic. So we know 5 good notes around, and we're going to play around this position of the fretboard here, because that's kind of, we all like playing in the middle of the fretboard. Okay, so we've got our root note, we've got our good notes. The next thing to do is to think about the rhythm. This is really important when you're playing a lick. and incredibly important when you're playing blues, because blues plays to a slightly different rhythm than other styles of music. Most music is based on 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, except blues. Blues, like 90% of blues, doesn't use that. It has a shuffle or a swing, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4. Okay, not 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, so getting into that groove is really, really important. So when you're playing licks, you want to, when you're playing, notes from a scale and you're trying to come up with your own lick, try and get that groove in. Feel that rhythm and get that rhythm into your playing. I'll try and demonstrate. Okay, hopefully you heard, I'm just goofing around in a scale there. Hopefully you heard within there was a rhythm. There was a pulse going all the way through the playing. Dum, da dum, da dum, da dum. I'm tapping my foot, I'm feeling that. So when we're coming up with our lick or trying to write our own licks, we know where the root note is, we know where the good notes are, and now we've got the rhythm of the piece as well. Now, not all blues is played over that exact hard shuffle of bum, ba, bum, ba, bum. Sometimes it's more of a swing, sometimes it's different things. But if you're going to write a solo, write your own licks to play over a piece of music, get the rhythm of that piece of music in. Okay, so we've got those things. The next thing to talk about, really important, is technique. One of I'd say the thing that makes the guitar so special is that you can play a single note in a multitude of different ways. Okay, I'm actually thinking of doing an entire video just on this subject. But you think of a piano, you can play a note really loud or you can play it soft. But that's basically the only variation you've got is in the volume. You think of an instrument like a harpsichord, you don't even have that. Either the note's on or it's off. But with the guitar, you can play a note a whole host of different ways. What am I going to do? I'm going to play this root note here. A note of A, or root note, 10th fret of the B string. And I'm going to play that same note in several different ways. Okay, let's do a slide as well. Okay, so you can kind of mix and match these up as well. As I say, I'm thinking of actually doing a whole lesson. If you think of your favorite guitar players, now if you like the real old school blues, Albert King, Albert Collins, B.B. King, those kind of players, they will favor certain techniques: vibrato, hammer on, pulling off, sliding into notes, those kind of things. They'll also have a lot of dynamics, so playing notes really loud, really soft. All of those are really kind of important in the blues, and particularly in that older style of blues. If you think of more modern players like Bonamassa, Clapton, although I know Clapton's not that modern now, but modern blues players, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix. Actually, I'm still naming kind of older players as well, but modern blues players. Then what you'll Kenny Wayne Shepherd, those kind of players. You'll get those old techniques, but you'll also get some more aggressive techniques in there as well. So you might get some whammy bar going on there as well, and those kind of things. But blues. Listen to your favorite blues players and figure out what techniques they use. Because what that's going to do is that then enables you to play a simple lick, but make each note ring out a bit more, so make each note a bit more individual. That's how you play with emotion, because you're actually hitting the notes in very different ways. So you think about things like double stops as well, where you're hitting two notes at the same time. So think about all of those things. I've talked before about bends and bending to a note, bending away from a note, bending a note dirty, bending it into tune, bending it out of tune, all of those kind of things. Go check out my other videos for kind of more in-depth stuff on that. But the point is that we're using all of these techniques to make it sound more interesting. The way a blues player would use techniques is build them all into one. So you might bend a note, you might hammer onto another one, you might slide into another one, you might shake another one, you might play another one soft, you might do a double stop. And you kind of, it's almost like you're using the techniques to kind of blare one note into the next, bend one note into the next, kind of slur between them rather than playing individual notes. I don't know if I'm describing this that well, but to me, you listen to players like Clapton, B.B. King, and those kind of players, and they are bending notes from one into the next, and it kind of, it's not one technique for the sake of the technique. Each note is just however the emotion is. I hope that explains it anyway. But as I say, this is something I have taught a little bit on, bit more on my improvisation series. I also did on the Play Your First Blues Solo lesson. I talked about how you might take a simple line like this, but a blues player might play it like this. Okay, so we've got bends, we've got slides, we've got all the different things. So a blues player will take a very simple line and just make it sound way more interesting by the way they're actually attacking the note. Okay, so if you want to write a blues lick in quite a mechanical way, think about those things. Establish the root, figure out the scale so you know where the good notes are, get into the groove, the rhythm, so that what you're gonna play is gonna have that rhythmic thing going on, and then use techniques to go from one note to the next to get more emotion in there. Okay, and if you do that, you should be on a good line to starting to write your own blues licks. Okay, so that's a very mechanical way of trying to come up with a lick. Let's think about more of a creative way of trying to come up with a lick. So what I would advise is basically learn loads and loads of other people's licks. And when I started playing, that was really, really tough in the late 80s, early 90s. It was so hard to get hold of good material and learn things. But now with YouTube and other things, you've got so much material on tap. You can just go in and learn tons of licks. Obviously, look at my channel. I've got tons and tons of lessons where I, licks in the key of G, licks in the key of C, fast licks, slow licks, swing licks, blues licks, all kinds of, different things. So learn loads and loads of licks, learn them from your favorite guitar players. And the reason why we do this is kind of, and when I say learn, I really mean don't just watch a YouTube video and go, oh, I understand that now. Actually get it into your fingers. Because the important thing about this is the reason why we want to learn so many licks is that we're teaching our fingers to move in a certain way. We're getting enough muscle memory in so that our fingers will naturally gravitate towards certain shapes. Because what will happen is the more licks you learn, what you'll do is you'll see certain moves within licks that are very, very common. So an example would be something like this. Okay, so bunch of variations there where I'm grabbing the 7th fret of the G string, bending it up a whole tone, and then doing something with the B string and E string at the 5th fret. So you can do this kind of thing. You can then reverse the order of those two things. So you can do kind of all different things, but the basic starting point is that grabbing that 7th fret, bending it up a whole tone and doing something, hitting either the B string and the E string at the 5th fret, either the B string first then the E string, or the E string first then the B string, or both together, maybe like this. Okay, you'll find loads and loads of licks that use that little movement within them. I remember the first time I saw Walter Trout play live, he seemed to be using that little move like loads and loads all night in loads of different solos, different keys and different things, and just doing loads of variations on that particular idea, and it sounded fantastic. So what you'll find is that if you listen to, if you learn Clapton licks or Hendrix licks or Freddie King licks or whatever they are, you'll notice the same kind of ideas popping up time and time again. And what will happen is your fingers then, when you try to write your own licks, will naturally gravitate towards those movements. Another really good technique that's more creative is to take a lick that you already know and just try and make as many variations as you can on it. So if I take a real cliched blues lick, something like, okay, so I'm sure we all know that one, and just see how many kind of variations you can come up with there. Okay, some of that sounded decent, some of it didn't, but you get the idea. You take an idea, you take a lick that you know, and you play it over and over and over again, but each time trying to vary it somewhat. Do this kind of on your own when you're practicing. Some of it will sound good, some of it will sound terrible. And what you'll do is you'll start coming up with your own licks that sound really good, because you'll be taking an idea and making it your own. Okay, I hope some of that has been useful. You might gravitate towards the mechanical way of doing it. It might be more towards the creative. I did both, I'll be honest. I would set a practice time where I'd work on specific things, very, technique and very scales and those kind of things. And maybe doing 10 minutes of that, and then 10 minutes of very creative, put on a backing track, jam along and try and come up with as many ideas as you can, that kind of thing, and split my practice time between the two. So I hope that's given you some ideas. Thanks very much for watching. If you found these lessons useful and you'd want to show your appreciation, I have a PayPal tip jar. You can also consider becoming a Patreon supporter as well, where you get extra videos and things as well. So please check out those. If you're interested in those, details are in the description below. Everything I've covered in this lesson, I actually go to in a lot more detail in the improvisation series, which is on YouTube, which I did earlier this year. So you might want to check out that if you want to go into any of these things in a bit more detail. Anyway, until next time, thank you to all the Patreons who make this possible by paying for all the lights and everything else, and I'll see you again soon.